Hey there. Ever feel like technology is just this runaway train and we're all just kind of clinging on for dear life?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Today, we're diving deep into how tech is impacting our lives, pulling insights from an episode of the Tech Talks podcast you shared.
It's a dense topic for sure,
It really
but
is.
that's what makes it, ripe for a deep dive, right?
Yeah.
Let's see if we can unearth some real gems from Lisa and Mark's conversation.
They covered a ton: communication, social media, the future of work,
Mm.
even AI ethics. But I'm curious what jumped out at you as particularly insightful.
Honestly, the thing that struck me most was this paradox of connection.
Okay.
Like Lisa and Mark, they cited these studies showing that despite being, we all know, more digitally connected than ever, right?
Right.
Rates of loneliness are skyrocketing.
Ah.
It's like we're mistaking the quantity of our online interactions for, genuine human connection.
That's such a good point. It reminds me, I read this article, I can't remember what it was called, but it was talking about this illusion of companionship, how all these surface level interactions can actually make us feel more isolated in the long run.
Exactly. And Lisa and Mark, they dug into the reasons behind this. One thing they mentioned was this pressure to maintain this perfect online persona,
Oh, yeah.
always on, always crafting the ideal response.
Yeah.
It creates this anxiety around social interaction that can be really
Oh,
draining.
tell me about it. It's like we're all performing for some invisible audience,
Right.
instead of just being ourselves.
Hmm.
I know I'm guilty of it. I spend way too much time agonizing over Instagram captions.
Right. And this pressure to project a flawless image, it doesn't just affect individuals. Like Lisa and Mark talked about how it impacts businesses
That's
too.
interesting.
They feel this constant pressure to be on brand and chase likes, even if it means, kind of sacrificing authenticity a little bit.
Which ironically can backfire. True.
Right.
Didn't they mention that study about how consumers can sniff out inauthenticity a mile away?
They did. It all circles back to that need for genuine connection. People crave honesty and vulnerability, even or maybe especially in the digital world.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if all this technology that's supposed to be connecting us is actually pushing us further apart.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's something Lisa and Mark kind of grappled with throughout the episode, particularly as they moved on to the topic of education.
Okay, let's unpack that. I mean, on the surface, it seems like technology is a boon for education, right?
Yeah,
We've got online learning platforms like Coursera and Khan Academy, making knowledge accessible to anyone with an internet connection.
absolutely. But, Lisa and Mark highlighted the other side of that coin, like the digital divide.
Right.
It's easy to get swept up in the potential of these platforms, but the reality is that not everyone has equal access.
For those unfamiliar, what exactly does digital divide mean in this context?
Essentially, it refers to the gap between those who have access to technology and those who don't. And it's about more than just, owning a computer or having Wi-Fi. It's about having the digital literacy skills and the support systems to effectively use technology for learning.
So while online education can be incredibly empowering for some, it could actually be widening existing inequalities.
Precisely. And Lisa and Mark brought up another really important point about online education. Like, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, right?
Right.
Some people thrive in self-paced online environments while others really need that in-person interaction and support.
That resonates with me. I did a few online courses during the pandemic,
Mhm.
and I really missed that sense of community,
Yeah.
and that back and forth you get in a traditional classroom setting.
It's about finding the right balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Leveraging the power of technology to expand access to education, but also recognizing the value of those traditional learning environments.
Hmm.
And speaking of finding balance, Lisa and Mark's discussion about the evolving workplace really got me thinking. The pandemic, it really threw a wrench into things, didn't it?
It really did.
Suddenly, remote work went from this niche concept to the new normal for a huge chunk of the workforce.
Yeah, talk about a crash course in digital adaptation.
Tell me about it.
But even as things have settled, it seems like the lines between work life and personal life are just blurrier than ever.
That's exactly what, Lisa and Mark were getting at. They were arguing that while remote work offers incredible flexibility,
Right.
which, let's be honest,
Yeah.
dream come true for a lot of people,
Totally.
but it presents new challenges too, like that expectation to be always on,
Right.
which we see cropping up in so many areas of our tech-driven lives these days.
It's true. It's that constant accessibility,
Yeah.
that feeling of needing to be available 24/7.
Yeah, and that can lead to burnout. And Lisa and Mark made kind of an interesting observation. They were saying, this isn't just an individual responsibility, right?
Okay.
It's a cultural shift. That needs to happen within companies as well.
Interesting. So what can companies actually do to support their employees in this new landscape? We can't exactly unplug from work entirely, can we?
Well, no, not entirely, but Lisa and Mark highlighted a few key things. First, setting clear expectations around availability. So, if you're not expected to answer emails at 10 p.m.
Right. Makes it a lot easier to actually disconnect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What else? They also emphasize the importance of providing the right resources.
Okay.
And this could be anything from, ergonomic workstations to mental health support services.
Right.
Basically just giving employees the tools they need to actually thrive in, a remote or a hybrid environment.
Yeah, it sounds like a collaborative effort is needed. It can't just be on the employee to figure this whole, work-life balance thing out on their own.
Yeah.
Companies have a responsibility, too, to create a healthy and sustainable work environment, even if, or perhaps especially when, that office is virtual.
Exactly. And, this whole conversation about the changing nature of work, it really circles back to the role of technology in shaping our future,
Okay.
particularly AI.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really interesting and maybe a little bit unnerving.
Because then we're not just talking about how tech impacts, how we connect or how we learn.
Yeah.
We're talking about its potential to reshape entire industries,
Yeah.
even our very understanding of what it means to work.
Precisely. And, Lisa and Mark, they didn't shy away from some of the more unsettling aspects of this. They dedicated a significant portion of the episode to the ethical implications of, all these advancements, especially in the field of artificial intelligence.
Which is a whole other can of worms.
Yeah.
I mean, we hear a lot about AI these days, right? Everything
Yeah.
from self-driving cars to algorithms that can write poetry.
Yeah.
But what are the potential downsides that Lisa and Mark wanted to highlight?
Well, one major concern they raised was, job displacement. As AI becomes more and more sophisticated, it's capable of automating tasks that were previously done by humans.
Right.
And this isn't just limited to, blue-collar jobs. We're talking about white-collar professions, too.
So it's not just about robots replacing factory workers anymore.
Right.
We're talking about AI potentially replacing lawyers and accountants, even, software developers, like the ones who probably coded this very podcasting platform.
I mean, kind of crazy, right?
It really is. I mean, it's fascinating, but also a bit terrifying, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, Lisa and Mark weren't arguing against the development of AI or anything like that. But they stressed the importance of having these open and honest conversations about its potential impact. We need to be thinking now about how we retrain workers, how we ensure equitable access to these new opportunities, and how we prevent certain segments of society from being left behind.
It's like that saying, technology is neutral. It's how we use it that matters.
Yes, exactly.
And speaking of using technology wisely, Lisa and Mark, they didn't leave us hanging with just a list of anxieties.
Yeah.
They actually offered some really practical advice for navigating this, increasingly tech-driven world.
They did, yeah. And what I really appreciated was that their advice wasn't about, swearing off technology entirely,
Right.
but rather about using it more mindfully.
Okay, I like that.
For example, they talked about the importance of setting boundaries, which, you've mentioned that as well.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It is huge. It's that whole, just because you can be online all the time doesn't mean you should be.
Exactly. And this applies to all aspects of our tech use, from social media to work emails. Lisa and Mark even suggested creating tech-free zones in your home.
Oh, interesting.
No phones at the dinner table.
I love that.
To encourage more present and meaningful interactions.
It's so easy to just let our devices dominate our lives,
Totally.
I'm trying to be more mindful about putting my phone away when I'm spending time with friends and family.
Yeah.
Sometimes I even leave it in another room, just out of sight, out of mind, right?
Absolutely. It's like they say, distracted from distraction by distraction.
Uh-huh.
Creating those mental and physical spaces, without technology can make a world of difference.
And what about social media? We
Yeah.
touched on this earlier, but it seems like such a black hole of, potential anxiety and comparison.
Yeah.
What were Lisa and Mark's thoughts on navigating that particular minefield?
Well, they offered this really insightful suggestion, which is to pay attention to how social media actually makes you feel. So, if you find yourself constantly comparing yourself to others or feeling inadequate, it might be time to reassess,
Yeah.
Who are you following? How much time are you spending on those platforms? Stuff like that.
It's like curating your own digital diet.
Yes, exactly.
We have more control over our online experiences than we realize sometimes.
We do. We absolutely do.
So setting boundaries, being mindful of our online habits, any other pearls of wisdom from Lisa and Mark?
Well, they ended the episode on what I thought was a really important note, which is that sometimes the best thing we can do is just unplug entirely.
A digital detox.
Exactly.
Nice.
And, it doesn't have to be anything drastic, even just taking a few hours away from screens,
Yeah.
going for a walk in nature, reading a book, having a conversation with a loved one. It can be incredibly refreshing.
That's like hitting the reset button on your brain.
It is.
Gives you a chance to reconnect with yourself and the world around you.
I love that. That's a great way to put it.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. Thanks for guiding us through this deep dive into, all things tech. It feels like we went beyond, simply summarizing the Tech Talks episode
Mm.
and uncovered some really valuable insights about how to navigate this ever-evolving, tech landscape.
It's a journey, isn't it?
It really is.
My pleasure. And, if there's one thing I hope listeners can take away from this, it's that awareness is key.
Yeah.
By understanding the potential benefits and drawbacks of technology, we can make more informed choices about how we integrate it into our lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And maybe, just maybe, this deep dive will inspire you to start your own tech talk.
Yeah. Yes.
With friends or family. After all, these conversations are just as important as the technologies themselves.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Till next time, stay curious.